Byte Tips.
Welcome to another Tech Byte Tips video. In today's video, we're gonna address a request that was received quite a while ago, but I didn't have the time to look at it carefully. But now we're gonna cover this request. This was by NWills. It was quite a while ago. And the request was basically, could you do Recyclarr in the future? So I assume that by that he means a guide on how to set it up in the Synology NAS. And I honestly was very unfamiliar with Recyclarr. It was an application that honestly was not within my radar. And I decided to go and take a look at this application and see what it was for, etc. And I found that they have their GitHub repository in github.com/recyclarr/recyclarr. And when you come here, you can see all the code. Seems to be an application written mainly in C#, a little bit of PowerShell, HTML, Shell, Python, and a Docker file. And it has 10 contributors. It's a pretty small amount of contributors to this application. And it's currently on version 6. And when I look at this README, I was trying to figure out what this application actually did. And then I saw that this is a command line application that synchronizes recommended settings from something called the trash guides to Sonar, Radar, and other type of R applications, right? And then I look at what the trash guides is, and then I go into that website, and it says this is a compilation of guides written by a person who was born out of this, right? So how did it all start? When this person was using Sonar and Radar, he noticed that the releases that were grabbed were not what they wanted because this person was very picky about the releases and the quality that they prefer. And they decided to fine-tune the quality profile settings in the R's to get the releases and qualities that they like. And then he found out that a bunch of people wanted to do the same, so he started explaining to a lot of people, but then it got annoying, so he just wrote it down on a website. And then he just started sharing the website for people to follow his guide to get the quality of the content that they preferred. So basically this tells me that this is one of those applications that is just an application to tweak another application. You already know what I thought about those with the previous one that I did before, but I'm gonna go through this again because somebody requested it. So when I go back into the Recyclarr GitHub repository, I look at what this thing is doing, what kind of things are being synchronized from the guides, and it says that it synchronizes the quality profiles, which includes the qualities and the quality groups, the custom formats, which includes scores for those formats, and you can specify that from the guides or manually, and the definition of the quality, so that describes the file sizes for that and how you name those files. So basically this is just tweaking the quality profiles sections of the Sonar, Radar, etc. applications. Here we go again with why just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. Point is that you're going through a lot of code on other things to just tweak another application's settings on one specific thing. I don't really see the point of having an application for that. Even more, a command line application where your users are not you're targeting the wrong user. If you're looking for people that consume and use applications like Sonar, Radar, etc., they're not developers, they're not programmers, they're not people that want to go into a file and modify configurations there that then they have to go back into another website and look what those configurations are, etc. So in my opinion, we started on the wrong foot because you're then targeting a very niche amount of people. So very, very few people that want to get very specific qualities of their content. But then again, this even becomes less useful because it makes sense if you're trying to grab new content that is coming out, is being released right now. So it's going to be a lot of availability of that content on a lot of different qualities and formats. But let's say if you're looking for a content that is old, and then you configure your Radar or your Sonar with those very specific settings, then you're going to have a hard time finding anything for that content that you want. Let's say you're looking for a movie that was released in 1930s. You're not going to find a movie most likely in 4K for that. So if you're very specific and you're saying ignore everything that doesn't fit this criteria, then you're making your life more difficult to acquire that type of content. So I just want to bring that up first, right? So just straight up, I'm going to say this, right? From the very beginning, I think this application is a bust. It really doesn't bring a lot of functionality, especially it's very niche. Very few people are going to actually find this useful from the perspective of what they want versus the amount of effort that they have to put into setting this up, right? So that gotten out of the way, now we can go ahead and follow the guides for setting up Recyclarr and figuring out how it works. So this gives me links to the installation, the command line reference, how to configure it, and all that stuff. So that's good. At least they make this easy for you. There's a wiki. If you click here, it's going to take you to this page here that tells you all that you need. The good thing, at least, is very organized. This person is very organized, or this group of people that have developed this. So it gives you the introduction of what the application is for. It tells you about the trash guides. You can go to that website that I saw before to see those guides. They have guides for a bunch of different applications here. For example, Radar, Sonar, Prowler, Bazaar, etc. So you have a bunch of things here that you theoretically could sync using the application Recyclarr. And then it gives you a section for how to install it and getting started, right? So in my case, we're going to be doing this in a Synology NAS. So we're going to be going to the features first of all to kind of see. We already covered this, but basically it just allows you to manage custom formats, quality profiles, definitions, and the naming and a few things like that. And this is a command line application. So then if we want to install this, it gives us several options. It gives us the option to use on RAID, or use a Docker Compose, or a manual installation. So in this case, we're going to be clicking on where it says Docker Compose, and we're going to be kind of following this part. And the first thing that we can see from here is that we have the image of Recyclarr in two different container registries. So we have the GitHub container registry and we have the Docker Hub container registry. So for our Synology NAS, we're going to be using the Docker Hub one. So we're going to be looking for this image to download. So Recyclarr. Perfect. If we scroll down a little bit here, we'll see an example of the Docker Compose file that they recommend to use. Obviously, it says you have to tweak it, so we're going to make some changes to that. But basically, it says that it's going to set itself up in a network named Recyclarr. We're not going to do that, so we're going to eliminate completely this part out of that Docker Compose file. And then it goes into defining the services. In this case, it says that it's going to be named Recyclarr, and then it's going to use the Google Container Registry image, but we're not going to use that one. I'm going to use the Docker Hub, so I'm going to change this. And then that's the name that we're going to give the container. So it's going to be Recyclarr. And then here's the user that it's going to run as. This is a very particular image because most images out there use the PUID, GUID as environment variables to establish as which type of user is going to run. But this one doesn't go that way. They go another route. So you have to specify the user here. So this is the user and this is the group. So what I'm going to do is, because of this, we cannot try to deploy this normally using the user interface because we don't have a way to do this. So we're going to use this Docker Compose file, and then we're going to change this for 1026, which is the default administrator account in our NAS, and the group 100, which is usually the group for that user, so that it has access to read and write stuff from the NAS. And then on the networks part, this is something that we're not going to use. We're just going to let it run on the default network. And then we're going to specify the mount point for the configuration files. And there's an environment variable here for our time zone. But I'm going to add another one because this container, unless you give it a environment variable, it won't create the configuration files that you need to modify later. So I'm going to add an extra one there to do that. So let's get to working on the NAS. The first thing that we're going to do is when we go into the NAS, here I'm in the container manager and we're in the projects section. So we're going to create a project. In this case, when I'm working on Synology 7.2, which is the latest version, they did something great. It's allowing us to manage networks and allowing us to use Docker Compose files to deploy things. So that's what we're going to use for this. And before we start working on the project, I want to go into my NAS, go into the Docker configs directory, and I'm going to create a folder for Recyclarr. So we can drop that configuration file in there. So here's going to be where our configuration stuff is going to exist. So now we can go here into the container manager window, and in here we're going to go into projects, and we're going to say create a new project. and then I'm going to name this Recyclarr, and then I'm going to say that this is going to point to a project in our NAS. So that's another thing that we have to do. We need a path to store our projects. So we're going to go here. I'm going to go all the way back to Docker, and besides the config folder, I'm going to create another folder called projects. And here's where I'm going to put my project. And in here, I'm going to create another folder for Recyclarr. So we have our Recyclarr project in here. So that's perfect. Let's go back into the configs here because we're going to go here later. Actually, let's just stay there for a bit. And now we're going to say, okay, use the folder docker projects Recyclarr to store this project. And then here it's telling me that the name has to be lowercase. So let's rename that to lowercase. And then it says, what do you want to do? Do you want to upload an existing Docker Compose file, or do you want to create one yourself? In my case, I'm just going to create it. It gives you time to copy what I'm doing. So let's do create, and now you see that we get a window here to type what we want. So now we're going to create that configuration, like our Docker Compose file for this project. So the first thing is we're going to say services. That is defining that we're creating a service here. And then we're going to name it Recyclarr. And then after that, we're going to say use the image. And then it's going to be Recyclarr. Because that is the Docker Hub repository is Recyclarr, and the image is Recyclarr. And then I want the latest. So I put :latest. So now it knows what image I want to use. Then I'm going to say that I want a container name. So I want to name the container that gets created as Recyclarr. And then once we have that, the next thing that we had in the configuration was that we need to specify a user for this container to run. So I'm going to say 1026 because that's the usual admin user for Synology and the group 100. And then now we have to also mount a volume. So we're going to say volumes, and then we're going to put a line here, a dash, and then the full path to our volume in the NAS. So mine is volume1 docker, and then I have the configs directory, and in there I have Recyclarr. And then we're going to map that inside the container to /config. So now after that, the next thing that we need to do, we need to go back one, and then we're going to say that the environment variables that we're going to define are line TZ, that's time zone, and in my case is America, New York. And then another one is Recyclarr _create_config, and we're going to say that is true. So whenever this container runs for the first time, if it doesn't see a configuration file, I want it to create it. So that's all that we need here, because we're not going to run this container in a separate network or anything like that. Everything's going to be on the default network where our other containers are, and we just specify all the necessary things for this to run. So now we go and click next, and then in my case that doesn't apply, but let's say for example you have your port 443 or port 80 or something like that to an application, and that's forwarded to your NAS, then you can set it up here to do like a reverse proxy to direct the traffic to there, and then it could like automatically manage the certificates and stuff. But in this case it's unapplicable, it's unrelated. So we're going to say next, and then here it's giving us a summary of everything. So we're going to create a project named Recyclarr, and it's going to be stored here, and it's going to create using a Docker Compose. And then it says that we want to start the project once it is created. For now I'm going to say no, and then we're going to say no, done. Now we have our project here. So if we see there is 0 containers running because we haven't started this project, it tells us the time that it was created and where's the path that contains the project file. So that's what I wanted to show here. So if we go into projects Recyclarr, now we see the compose file here that we just created in the user interface. It stores it in the NAS that way. And then if we click on details, then we can see information about the containers. In this case, currently nothing. Statistics, you could see statistics here once the project is running. And then here's the YAML configuration that we created. You can always come back here and edit it if you need to. And in the settings, you can see other stuff related to the project. But that's basically it. So now that we have this, what we can do is first let me go into the configs Recyclarr, and you see there's nothing here. So now let's look at what happens when we run this. So I'm going to say build this project, and then we're going to get this window that is telling us what is happening. And I already had the image in my NAS, so it didn't pull it, but you would see if you don't have it, it will pull it here, and then it's creating the container and starting it, and then it should, when it's done doing its thing, if everything is working correctly, it should say exit 0, and there we go, it says exit code 0, so 0 means success, it means it was okay. So now if we go into the details here, we should see a container now. So as you can see, we have a container, and here has the information about the container, how much CPU it's using, how much RAM it's using, a network, and all that. And its statistics gives us a graph of things like the container is using. For example, CPU, we can see the RAM, we can see the network, all of that here. And then that's good. So now if we go into the container section, we'll see Recyclarr is here, and we can go into the details and the log. And if we look, it was pretty fast. It says that it started and it's going to be running daily. So this container, if you don't specify anything, just like I did, is going to run once a day and make sure that those trash guides are set up properly in Radar and Sonar. If you want it to run on a faster schedule, there's an option that you can put for that, but it's beyond what I want to do in this video. So just look at the documentation and add it later if you want. And then it says they created the configuration at the config Recyclarr, and it updated the Git repositories and the guides and everything. It has everything that it needs, and it created the default Recyclarr YAML file. So now if we go here and we refresh, we have folders and we have those two configuration files. So this is important because these files are things that you have to pay attention to. Let's go into the NAS real quickly, and we go into Recyclarr, and then let me show you what that has. So if I open the Recyclarr YAML with Notepad, this is basically the configuration file for this application. And if I open the settings one, this one doesn't have a lot, honestly. So where you have to concern about putting most of your configuration is here in the Recyclarr one. But if you want to also make changes here in the settings, they give you a URL here that you can go to, and it'll give you things that you can put in this file to configure it, right? So for now, I'm just going to ignore this. Like I said, it's beyond what I want to show in this video. So in here, here's the important thing. There's configurations for Sonar and there's configurations for Radar. Looks like right now that's the only two applications that this application is working with. So you would have to come here and then follow these instructions. Where it says base URL, you would put the IP of your NAS here, and you would put the port of your Sonar instance. So in our case, it's been 8082 all the time. So then you put your API key here, and that's basically the connection part for Sonar. And then in here, it says that this is the quality definition from the trash guides that you want to sync to Sonar. So it says that you have series, anime, and you pick the one that you want here, right? So for example, this is for TV series. And then it says that there are profiles that you can specify for this. And you have to go into the trash guides in this URL that they give you and look for the options that you're going to put here. To me, I'm not going to cover it. It's irrelevant. I'm not going to use this application, honestly, but that's what you do. In here, they put an example, for example, low quality groups and release groups and repacks and propers and stuff like that. So those are the IDs that it wants to sync for the series. And then for the anime, in this case, right, if you want to use animes, you have to uncomment this, and then you have to put the appropriate values also. So that's for Sonar. This is all you have to configure for Sonar to be synchronized, for Recyclarr to synchronize with Sonar. And then you do the same with Radar. You put your IP of your NAS, the port of Radar, which is in our case 8083. You put your API key here, and that's all that you need for the configuration of the connection. And then here it says that the only option is movie, so you leave it as movie. And then you look for the trash guides for the things that you want to synchronize. So for example, they give you an example here of a Blu-ray disc, EVO, low quality, X265 and 3D. So you can put all that you want there, and it's going to synchronize it. And for the quality profiles, this option here that you can also work with. So this is how you configure Recyclarr to synchronize with Sonar and Radar. And once you have that done, then what the application is going to do is that it's going to synchronize every day. It's going to check whatever it has in the configuration and then compare it to what Sonar and Radar have. And if there's any difference, it's going to correct those differences. And that's how you make those changes to your quality profiles and all of that automatically through this application. So that's gonna be it. I hope that this helps you if you are interested in using this application. And remember, if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. Also remember that you can share the videos to people that might find it useful, so I'll appreciate it if you do that, because it'll make our videos more impactful in the community. And once again, I am not monetizing this channel. On my part, there should be no ads in my videos, and I'm relying entirely on your support to focus on this channel. So I would appreciate it if you donate in the link in the description below through PayPal or through Bitcoin. There's the Bitcoin wallet address there too, because that'll help me focus on the channel and give you good quality content. So that's gonna be it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.